and welcome to the Coastal Edge Consulting Channel. I'm Melissa Ketler. Today we're going to be talking about how to future-proof your team because 2030 is just around the corner and things are changing so fast that it's hard for leaders to even keep up. So there's obviously a lot of changes happening with technology, AI, global uncertainty, shifting demographics, and it's changing the leadership landscape. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the skills that your team needs to not just survive in this changing environment, but also how to thrive. Picture this, a team so prepared, so adaptable, and so resilient that no matter what hits, whether it be AI, automation, market chaos, they don't just get by, they perform at their best. That's not a dream, that's what we're aiming for today. So let's start off with part one. The Great Reset. Why are skills shifting so dramatically? Let's start out with technology. As I'm sure you're all aware, AI and the advance of technology is changing the job landscape faster than anyone expected. Even quantum computing will reshape what we do and how we do it. Whole departments that used to handle a task can now be managed by just one individual or one tool. Think back to late 2022 when ChatGPT exploded onto the market. Suddenly, workplaces were split. Some leaders were actually banning it, and some were wondering what they should do. And then others jumped in and adopted it pretty early, thinking about how can this new tool actually help us? And those were the leaders and the teams that pulled ahead. Next, we have global uncertainty. I think we are all very aware of what's happening on the global landscape. There's a lot of geopolitical tension, supply chain issues, inflation. Let's be real. Business as usual is dead. That's a thing of the past. Teams that can't adapt to constant change will fall behind very quickly. And then there are workforce shifts. I wouldn't be surprised if many of you have teams that span 4 or even 5 generations. Gen Z doesn't want the same things that Gen X or boomers might want. They have very different expectations. If leaders don't adapt to those differences, they're going to bleed talent and fast. This is what I call the Great Reset. The rules of work are changing, and we have to change too. Okay, let's move on to part 2. Beyond the buzzwords, the core human-centric skills that we all need. So obviously we hear a lot of buzzwords such as resilience, collaboration, but what really matters? Let's keep it simple. For a future-focused, successful team, critical thinking and problem solving will be crucial. Teams need to cut through the noise, analyze situations, and get creative with solutions pretty much every day. The second thing is emotional intelligence and empathy. I once worked with a leader who had an amazing team, almost genius-level employees. They seemed like they were unstoppable. But in reality, every meeting turned into a fight, an argument. Every team meeting digressed into internal conflict between employees. But once they invested in those team-building skills and they learned to build trust and empathy, their productivity and output doubled. Same skills, just a different mindset. So the next set of skills is around adaptability and learning. So this isn't new information, and the term learning organization became very trendy for a lot of years. But truthfully, being able to adapt and pivot quickly is now non-negotiable. Leaders need to encourage teams to try new things, to adapt, to innovate, even if it means failing, because failure should be treated as a learning step, not a career killer. And so organizations need to continue that learning environment mindset. Okay, the next section, part 3, is around technological fluency and data skills. In order to have a successful team, we all need to continue to grow our tech skills. Here's the truth. Technology is everyone's job. It doesn't just sit with IMIT departments anymore. Let's talk about data literacy. I once worked with a manager who proudly said, "I don't do spreadsheets. That's not my job." Well, that might have worked 20 years ago, but not now. If you can't read, interpret, and understand data, you're basically leading blind, and your team is probably well aware of that. The other area that needs high level of focus is in the digital collaboration realm. Obviously, with the introduction of virtual meetings, work from home, etc., and the introduction of Teams and SharePoint, Zoom, all of these different platforms, remote and hybrid work isn't going away. And as a matter of fact, organizations that are now pivoting and trying to resist that remote work option, they're going to also lose future generation talent, because that's what people are going to be looking for. They're going to invest in those companies that gives them that work-life balance and a little bit more flexibility. Teams, therefore, that can work seamlessly in that virtual environment with the right tools that actually connect them, currently move and will continue to move much faster than teams that are stuck in the old ways. Now, it's not to say that in-person teams can't be successful. It's just that the future of collaboration and being able to leverage the talent no matter where they are, that's going to give companies an edge. And then the third thing under this realm of tech fluency is cybersecurity awareness. There's always a risk of breaches. Cyber risks are not just an IT problem. There are always going to be people who are going to click the wrong link, open an unsolicited email, or reusing a weak password that could potentially bring the whole system to a halt. Everyone plays a role in protecting the organization, so that needs to be forefront in employee training. Part 4 is around building future-proof structures. Skills are essential, yes, but the way we structure teams can make or break them. Let's talk about agility and collaboration. Every leader needs to look at how to tear down those silos. Those interdepartmental dynamics will be so valuable in the future. The more teams can share across roles and departments, the faster they will innovate. Another aspect that leaders need to continue to focus on is psychological safety. This isn't going to go away anytime soon. And this isn't about being too nice. It's about creating a space where people feel safe to share, to test ideas, take risks, but also admit failure. There's actually a Canadian bank that I read about that they have introduced something called Failure Fridays. And this is where teams can share what didn't work and then also what they learned. That's how innovation sticks. Look within your organization where you might be able to do some sharing of best practices, and think carefully about how you respond to mistakes and failures within your own organization. Is there room for improvement? The other thing that might be getting lost within your organization is around purpose-driven work. People don't want just a paycheck anymore. They're coming into organization based on culture, values. They want to feel like their work matters, that when they reflect back on their career, will they feel like they actually contributed to something that made a difference? And when you tie purpose to responsible tech use, like ethical AI, you create teams that are engaged and motivated. Now, when it comes to ethical AI, if your organization doesn't yet have an ethical AI model or structure, click the link in the description, and I do have a very basic overview of an ethical AI framework that you could adopt for your organization as a starting point. Okay, let's talk about part 5, the roadmap. What actionable steps you could take? How do you make this happen? Okay, well, step 1, check and review your team's current skills. You could do a quick inventory, a survey even, or just have some conversations. But you need to really figure out where the gaps are within your own team. And then number 2, you're going to need to upskill and potentially reskill some of your employees. And don't wait until jobs are disrupted. Start now. I've seen teams do monthly skill swaps, again, sharing best practices. One person could teach Excel skills, for example. One person could teach a little bit around SharePoint. And truthfully, upskilling on TikTok or Instagram usage. And then maybe bring in finance to teach some budgeting skills. It costs nothing, but it builds a learning culture. At one organization I used to work for, we used to do regular lunch and learns. Those lunch and learns are so valuable, and it can be voluntary. You share the topic, people drop in if they need that kind of learning. The next actionable step that you can take is make lifelong learning the norm. Just remember, as a leader, your team will mirror what you do. So if you invest and prioritize learning, that you support experimentation and curiosity, they will too. You could build some small rituals in your team meetings, do some quick share-outs, maybe read an article and then discuss what value that article might have in terms of your own team dynamic or your own team's learning. There's many different ways that you can incorporate these into your own learning culture. So I hope those tips helped. The future of work isn't something to fear. It's just something to get ready for. The teams that are going to thrive in the next 5 to 10 years won't just be high tech. They will be adaptable, the most human, and the most eager to learn. And here's a cautionary tale. Think back to the early 2000s when Blockbuster used to be so massive. They thought they had time to adapt to streaming, but they didn't get ahead of the curve. And so remember, even when you think your organization is at its peak, you have to be paying attention. And as a leader, your job is to stay ahead of that curve. So if you found this video helpful, hit like, subscribe. I'd love to hear your comments, especially if you have other ideas around what that future of work might look like. And also, please feel free to share it with a leader who you think might find some value in this content. Let's build teams that don't just survive the future, but they own it. Okay, and with that, remember to keep on striving. I hope you'll come back for future videos. I'm glad you had a chance to stop by. See you next time. Bye-bye.